The Seattle rain tapped gently against the floor-to-ceiling windows of our Belltown apartment. I stood there, coffee in hand, watching the early morning commuters hurry along First Avenue below. The Space Needle pierced through the misty gray sky, a constant reminder of why we chose this place. Emma and I had always dreamed of living in the heart of the city. Now, 3 years into our marriage, we had everything we'd hoped for. At least, that's what I kept telling myself. The sound of Emma's heels clicking against the hardwood floor broke my reverie. She emerged from our bedroom, impeccably dressed in her usual Nordstrom attire, a sleek blazer and pencil skirt combo that screamed creative director. "Morning," she mumbled, barely glancing in my direction as she made her way to our Keurig machine. I watched her precise movements, noting how she seemed to calculate each step, each gesture. It had been like this for weeks now, the distance between us growing wider than the Puget Sound itself. "Big presentation today?" I asked, attempting to bridge the gap. "MMM," she responded, focused on selecting the right coffee pod. "The Nike account? Done. Bless it. I need to focus." And just like that, another conversation died before it could begin. I turned back to the window, letting the silence settle between us like morning fog. 3 years ago, we were that couple everyone envied at Capitol Hill dinner parties. The tech project manager and the advertising executive, both climbing our respective corporate ladders. Both fond of weekend wine tastings in Woodinville. Both seemingly perfect for each other. Now, I couldn't remember the last time we'd actually talked, really talked. My phone buzzed with a Slack notification from work. Another crisis at the office that needed my attention. "I might be late tonight," Emma announced, gathering her things. "Meeting with the Nike team?" "No, just work stuff." She wouldn't meet my eyes as she said it. I nodded, swallowing the questions that threatened to spill out. As she headed for the door, I noticed she'd left her coffee untouched on the counter. The steam rising from it reminded me of all the things left unsaid between us. The rest of my week followed a similar pattern. Early mornings of awkward silence. Late nights of empty apartments. Quick text messages about picked up takeout from Din Tai Fung. Uneaten dinners left in the fridge. It wasn't until Saturday morning that everything changed. I was at our usual spot in Starbucks Reserve Roastery on Pike Street. The familiar scent of freshly roasted coffee beans filled the air. Emma had surprisingly agreed to meet me here. She walked in exactly at 10 a.m., her punctuality a remnant of her Midwest upbringing. Something about her expression made my stomach tighten. She sat down across from me, her hands wrapped around her cup of flat white. "Dan," she began, her voice steady but her fingers betraying her nervous sness as they tapped against the ceramic. "We need to talk about us." Those words, the universal precursor to relationship earthquakes. Okay, I managed, my own coffee suddenly tasting bitter. "I've been doing a lot of thinking." She paused, watching a hipster barista create elaborate latte art nearby. "And I've been reading about different ways couples make their relationships work." My mind raced through possibilities, each worse than the last. "There's this concept," she continued, her marketing presentation voice kicking in. "It's becoming quite common, especially in progressive cities like Seattle." She took a deep breath. "I think we should try an open marriage." The words hit me like a wrongly timed deploy in my coding pipeline. An open what? Marriage, where we're free to explore connections with other people. The ambient coffee shop chatter suddenly seemed very far away. "Emma, if this is about us not spending enough time together." "It's not that, Dan." "Well, not just that." She leaned forward, her voice dropping. "I've been talking to some people at work. It's more common than you'd think. In advertising, everywhere. Silicon Valley, New York, even here." I stared at my reflection in the coffee, distorted and uncertain. Is there someone specific you're thinking about?" "No," she answered too quickly. "This isn't about other people. It's about us. About growing together by growing individually." The rehearsed quality of her words made my skin crawl. And you think sleeping with other people will help us grow? An elderly couple at the next table glanced our way. Emma's cheeks flushed. It's not just about sex, Dan. It's about openness, honesty, exploring new experiences. I wanted to laugh at the irony of using honesty to justify what felt like sanctioned cheating. Have you already? No. She cut me off. I wouldn't. Not without discussing it first. The relief I felt was minimal at best. I need time to think about this. Of course, she nodded, suddenly businesslike again. Take all the time you need. She gathered her designer bag, ready to make her exit. I have a meditation class at Core Power Yoga. Of course she did. As I watched her leave, I couldn't help but wonder if this was her way of telling me our marriage was already over. The following week passed in a blur of meetings and deadlines. Emma and I danced around each other in our apartment. Two satellites in decaying orbit. I threw myself into work, debugging code until my eyes burned. She seemed to spend more time than ever at the office. Neither of us mentioned the conversation at Starbucks. It wasn't until the following Friday that the subject resurfaced. I was working late at the office, the Seattle skyline twinkling through the rain. A text message lit up my phone. It was Sarah, Emma's younger sister. Hey stranger, heard you might need someone to talk to. I stared at message for a long moment. Sarah and I had always gotten along well. The fun-loving yoga instructor who brought light to family gatherings. But we hadn't really talked since things with Emma began to strain. Rough couple of weeks, I replied. Dick's Drive-In? My treat. I smiled despite myself. Sarah knew my weakness for their greasy cheeseburgers. Queen and location? 30 minutes. See you there. The drive up Queen and Hill cleared my head somewhat. I found Sarah already waiting, perched on one of the outdoor tables. Her yoga-toned frame wrapped in Lululemon layers against the evening chill. You look like you need this more than I do, she said, pushing a paper bag of burgers and fries toward me. The familiar comfort food smell wafted up. Emma told you about the open marriage thing? Yeah. She watched me unwrap a burger. How are you holding up? I took a bite, buying time to form an answer. Honestly, I don't know. Sarah nodded, stealing one of my fries. It's a lot to process. Did you know about this being a thing in her circles? Sarah's expression turned thoughtful. Emma's been different lately, ever since she got that promotion. She paused, choosing her words carefully. She's been hanging out with a new crowd. Lots of tech money, very progressive ideas. And you think that's where this is coming from? Maybe. Or maybe she's just scared. I looked at her, questioning. Of what? Of settling. Of missing out. Of ending up like our parents. The mention of their parents hung heavy in the air. 25 years of Midwest suburban monotony. You know Emma, Sarah continued. She's always chasing the next big thing. I thought about our life together. The constant upgrades, apartments, cars, social circles. Yeah, I know. We sat in comfortable silence, sharing fries and watching cars pass by. Whatever you decide, Sarah said finally. Just make sure it's what you want, not what Emma wants. Her words stayed with me during the drive home. Our apartment was dark when I arrived. A text from Emma lit up my phone. Staying late at the office. Don't wait up. I stood in our kitchen, surrounded by high-end appliances we rarely used. The weight of decisions pressing down on me. My phone buzzed again. Sarah, thanks for the chat. Here if you need me. I smiled, feeling a little less alone in our empty apartment. The next morning, I woke to find Emma already gone. A note on the kitchen counter. Went to hot yoga with the girls. Lunch meeting after. I spent the morning walking around Lake Union, watching seaplanes take off and land, trying to sort through my thoughts. By the time I got home, I had made a decision. Emma was in our home office, laptop open on our West Elm desk. We should talk, I said from the doorway. She looked up, surprised by my directness. About your suggestion, the open marriage. She closed her laptop, giving me her full attention. Okay, if we do this, I began carefully. We need rules, boundaries. The smile that spread across her face made my stomach turn. Of course, I've actually done some research. She pulled up a document on her laptop. Of course, she had PowerPoint slides ready. As she walked me through her proposed guidelines, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was agreeing to my own execution. But I nodded along, watching her enthusiasm with a detached fascination. By the end of the night, we had our rules. Complete honesty about any connections. No mutual friends or coworkers. Regular check-ins about feelings and boundaries. Safe sex was non-negotiable. No staying overnight with others. Home was our space. Emma seemed satisfied, almost excited, like we'd just agreed on a new kitchen renovation, not the complete restructuring of our marriage. This is going to be good for us, she said, kissing my cheek before heading to bed. I stayed up late, sitting on our balcony, watching late-night traffic crawl along First Avenue. My phone lit up with a text. Sarah, you okay? Emma seemed really happy on our family group chat. I stared at the message, unsure how to respond. I said yes to the open marriage. Three dots appeared immediately. Disappeared. Reappeared. Finally. Want to grab coffee tomorrow? Looks like you could use a friend. I smiled despite the heaviness in my chest. Cafe Vito on Pike? 10 Uhr morgens. I'll be there. Try to get some sleep, Dan. But sleep didn't come easily that night. As I lay in bed beside Emma, listening to her steady breathing, I couldn't help but wonder if I'd just made the biggest mistake of my life. Or if perhaps, just perhaps, our marriage was already over, and this was just the beginning of the end. The morning after our agreement, Seattle's weather matched my mood. Dark clouds hung low over the city. Rain pelted against windows with unusual force. Emma had already left for an early client meeting. Her side of the bed barely touched. I found myself at Cafe Vita earlier than planned. The familiar scent of espresso and hipster determination filled the air. Sarah arrived right at 10, her yoga mat strapped to her back, her long dark hair damp from the rain. You look like hell, she said, sliding into the seat across from me. Thanks. I feel worse. She studied my face with concern. So you really agreed to it? I nodded, staring into my Americano. What choice did I have? Saying no? Counseling? Literally anything else? Her directness was refreshing after months of Emma's careful corporate speak. She made it sound so logical. Emma can make anything sound logical. She sold Mom on that timeshare in Boca, remember? I couldn't help but smile. That's different, is it? She's always been good at getting what she wants. Sarah leaned back, adjusting her Lululemon jacket. The question is, what do you want, Dan? I didn't have an answer. The NEXT few weeks passed in a strange blur. Emma seemed happier, more engaged. She started coming home at regular hours again. Even suggested we try that new fusion place in Capitol Hill. But there was an underlying tension, a sense of waiting for the other shoe to drop. Then one Tuesday evening, she came home glowing. I met someone, she announced. I was coding on the couch, trying to fix a bug that had been haunting me all day. My fingers froze over the keyboard. Oh, his name is Tyler. He's a UX designer at Amazon. Of course he was. We had coffee today. Just talked. I nodded, unable to form words. I'd like to see him again. Another nod. If that's okay. I finally looked up at her, her eyes bright with an excitement I hadn't seen in years. That's what we agreed to, right? She smiled, kissing my cheek before heading to the bedroom. I sat there for hours after she went to sleep, my laptop screen growing dim. Finally, I grabbed my keys. The night air felt thick with possibility. I found myself driving to Sarah's apartment in Fremont. It was nearly midnight when I texted her. You up? Three dots appeared immediately. Hot chocolate and terrible late-night TV. Please. Sarah's apartment was smaller than ours, but somehow felt more like a home. Mismatched furniture and plant life everywhere. Emma met someone, I said, accepting the hot chocolate. Sarah sat cross-legged on her worn couch. Already, Tyler, UX designer at Amazon. Wow, she moves fast. We sat in comfortable silence. Some reality show about baking played quietly in the background. You know what's weird? I said finally. What? I'm not even angry. Just empty. Sarah moved closer, her shoulder touching mine. That's worse than anger. Yeah. More silence. Done? Mm. You deserve better than empty. I turned to look at her. Really look at her. The warmth in her eyes. The slight worried crease between her brows. And something shifted. Subtle but seismic. I left before sunrise. Driving home through empty streets. Trying to ignore the way my heart raced. The way Sarah's concerned gaze followed me. Emma was still asleep when I got home. I showered and went straight to work, hoping lines of code could drown out complicated feelings. The next few weeks fell into a new routine. Emma went on dates with Tyler, coming home late with stories she half told. I spent more time with Sarah, just talking, watching bad TV, trying not to notice how alive I felt around her. One evening, Emma was out with Tyler. I was at Sarah's, helping her rearrange furniture. Why do you own so many plants? I asked, moving yet another potted monstrosity. They clean the air, and they don't ask complicated questions. She grinned, directing me where to put the snake plant. Unlike some people I know. Exactly. A little further left. I adjusted the plant. There. Perfect. She stepped back to admire the new arrangement, brushing against me as she moved. The contact sent electricity through my spine. Sarah, don't. She stepped away. We can't. I know. But we both felt it. The charge in the air. The unspoken possibilities. I left earlier than usual that night, driving home through a city that suddenly felt too small. Emma was waiting up when I got home. Where were you? Helping Sarah move furniture. Not a lie. Not the whole truth either. You've been spending a lot of time with her. You've been spending a lot of time with Tyler. She flinched slightly. That's different. Is it? The question hung between us, heavy with implications. We agreed to be honest, Dan. I am being honest. Are you? I met her gaze. Are you? She looked away first. The next day, I threw myself into work, debugging code like my life depended on it, ignoring texts from both Emma and Sarah. But by evening, I found myself driving to Fremont again. Sarah opened her door before I could knock. We need to talk about this. I followed her inside, past the jungle of plants, to her small balcony overlooking the canal. What are we doing, Dan? The question I'd been avoiding for weeks. I don't know. You're married. To my sister. In an open marriage. That's not the same thing, isn't it? She turned to face me, the setting sun painting her in gold. You know it's not. And then somehow we were kissing. All the tension of the past weeks exploding. Everything I'd been trying not to feel rushing in. It felt like drowning. It felt like breathing for the first time. We broke apart, both shaken. We shouldn't have done that. No, this will destroy everything. I know, but we didn't move away from each other. Dan, I know. My phone buzzed. Emma, coming home soon? Reality crashed back in. I should go. Sarah nodded, not meeting my eyes. Yeah. I drove home in a daze. Found Emma waiting up again. Everything okay? No, nothing was okay. Fine, just work stuff. She nodded, accepting the lie. We went to bed in silence, miles apart despite sharing the same space. The next week was torture, avoiding Sarah's texts, pretending everything was normal with Emma, drowning in guilt and want. Then Friday night, Emma dropped her bomb. I slept with Tyler. We were at our dining table, Thai takeout growing cold between us. What? Last night? It just happened. You stared here, wondering why I felt nothing. Aren't you going to say anything? What do you want me to say? I don't know. Something. Anything. Was it good? She recoiled slightly. Dan. No, really. Was it everything you hoped for? You're being cruel. Am I? We agreed to this, remember? She pushed away from the table. I'm going to bed. I waited until I heard the bedroom door close, then grabbed my keys. Sarah opened her door without surprise. I heard. How? Macau. Led me. She's upset. She slept with him. I know. We stood there, the weight of everything between us. What are we doing, Sarah? Making a mess. Yeah. She stepped aside, letting me in. We didn't talk much that night. Just sat on her couch, her head on my shoulder, watching the world go by through her window. At some point, she turned to me. We can't keep pretending. I know. Someone's going to get hurt. Someone already is. She kissed me then, soft and sad and inevitable. And this time, we didn't stop. Morning came with a weight of reality. Seattle's gray light filtered through Sarah's curtains, highlighting the magnitude of what we'd done. Sarah was already awake, making coffee in her tiny kitchen. We need to tell her, she said, not turning around. The smell of fresh coffee couldn't mask the anxiety in the air. I know. It should come from you. She was right, of course. But knowing something and doing it are very different things. I drove home in the early morning light. The Space Needle stood like an accusation against the clearing sky. Emma was in the kitchen when I arrived, still in her silk pajamas, looking surprisingly calm. Where were you? The question hung in the air between us, heavy with the weight of truth about to break. We need to talk. She set down her coffee cup. About? Sarah. One word. But it changed everything. Emma's face went through a series of emotions. Confusion. Understanding. Rage. How long? Last night. But what? The feelings. They've been there for a while. She laughed. A hollow, bitter sound. My sister. Of all people. Emma, don't. Just don't. She turned away, gripping the kitchen counter. Get out. We should talk about this. Get out. I packed a bag while she called someone. Probably Tyler. The irony wasn't lost on me. Sarah's couch became my temporary home, neither of us knowing quite what to do next. The family group chat exploded. Emma told everyone her version of events. Her parents stopped speaking to Sarah. Mutual friends took sides. Our carefully curated Seattle social circle fractured. Work became a refuge. Lines of code didn't judge, didn't ask complicated questions. Then the lawyers got involved. Emma hired Samantha Chun, known for handling high-profile tech divorces. The first meeting was in a sleek downtown office. Views of Elliott Bay mocking the wreckage inside. Mrs. Thompson claims the affair predates your open marriage agreement. Samantha's voice was professionally neutral. That's not true. Can you prove it? I couldn't, of course. The next months became a blur of legal documents. Asset divisions. Accusations. Counter-accusations. Emma wanted everything. The apartment. The investments. Even my Tesla stock options. Sarah stood by me through all of it. But I could see the guilt eating at her. Maybe I should talk to her, she said one end. She won't listen. She's my sister, Dan. Not anymore. Not according to her. The court proceedings were brutal. Emma's lawyer painted me as a manipulator, someone who had used the open marriage as cover to pursue my wife's sister. Our texts and emails dissected. Every coffee meetup scrutinized. Every late-night conversation questioned. Sarah testified, trying to explain how it happened, her voice shaking as she faced her sister across the courtroom. Emma wouldn't even look at her. In the end, the judge sided mostly with Emma. She got the apartment, most of our joint assets. My lawyer called it a fair settlement. It didn't feel fair, but I was too tired to fight anymore. That night, Sarah found me on her balcony, staring at the Fremont Bridge. What now? The question we'd both been avoiding. I can't stay in Seattle. She nodded, like she'd been expecting this. Too many memories? Too many ghosts. She was quiet for a moment. I heard Portland's nice. I turned to look at her. Portland? Good coffee. Lots of tech jobs. No sales tax. You come with me? Try to stop me. We found a small apartment in Portland's Pearl District. Industrial chic meets Pacific Northwest charm. Sarah transferred to a local yoga studio. I found a remote position with a startup. Slowly, we started building something new, away from the shadow of what we'd destroyed. Emma stayed in Seattle. Last we heard, she was still with Tyler. Posted photos of them hiking Mount Rainier. Looking happy. Or Instagram happy, at least. The guilt never fully went away. But it changed, evolved into something more complex. A recognition that sometimes love and pain go hand in hand. That happiness often comes at a cost. One rainy Portland morning, nearly a year after everything, Sarah and I were walking along the Willamette River. I got an email from Emma, she said suddenly. My heart stuttered. What did it say? She's getting married. To Tyler. We stopped walking, rain dripping from our shared umbrella. How do you feel about that? Sarah considered for a moment. Sad. Happy. Relieved. All of it. I squeezed her hand, understanding completely. She said she doesn't hate us anymore. Progress. She's not ready to see us. But maybe someday. We continued our walk. The Portland rained gentler than Seattle's somehow. More forgiving. Later that week, we found a for lease sign in a brick building on Mississippi Avenue. Large windows. Wooden floors. History in every beam. It would make a great yoga studio, Sarah mused. With a coffee shop, I added, and books. A community space. We signed the lease that day. Spent weeks renovating, painting walls, installing floors, building something that was purely ours. The grand opening of Mindful Space came in spring. Portland's cherry blossoms in full bloom. Sarah taught the first yoga class, while I managed the coffee bee. Local authors filled our shelves. Artists hung work on our walls. We created the kind of place we needed when we were lost and broken in Seattle. Life settled into new rhythms, different from what we'd planned, but somehow better, more authentic. One evening, closing up the shop, Sarah wrapped her arms around me from behind. Any regrets? I thought about Seattle, about Emma, about all the pain and chaos. No, and I'm in it. You. She was quiet for a moment. I regret the way it happened, but not that it happened. Never that. We locked up and walked home, hand in hand through the Portland night, past food trucks and breweries, street art and coffee shops. This city that had given us a second chance. The next morning brought news. Emma had posted about her engagement. Tagged Sarah in it. A small olive branch. A tiny step toward healing. Sarah cried when she saw it. Happy tears this time. Later that week, a package arrived. A wedding invitation. With a handwritten note. Not ready for you to come, but ready for you to know. We framed it in our office. A reminder that time changes things. That healing is possible. Even if it takes different forms than we expect. That night, in our apartment above the shop, Sarah turned to me in bed. Do you ever think about how strange life is? How so? How the worst decisions can lead to the best outcomes. I pulled her closer, understanding exactly what she meant. Outside, Portland's rain tapped gently against our windows. Different from Seattle's rain, just as we were different now. Changed by love and loss and choices, but somehow stronger for it all. I love you, Sarah whispered. Simple words, but hard one. I love you too. And in that moment, everything else faded away. The past with its complications, the future with its uncertainties, leaving just us, in our chosen city, in our created life, making peace with the chaos that brought us here, finding beauty in the breakdown, and grace in the rebuild, as Portland's gentle rain washed everything clean.